Retirement is often seen as a destination, but we believe it's an opportunity to pursue your passions, realize your dreams, and live a purposeful life. Great decisions, incredible lives. Retire with Intention podcast is about more than just money. It's about embracing the things that truly matter, the experiences, the relationships, and the impact you leave behind. Here is your host, John Creekmur.
Well, everybody, welcome back to Great Decisions, Incredible Lives, Retire with Intention. And I thank you so much for listening and just being here every single week, and so many great conversations and such huge feedback. And as a lot of you all know, we have a book coming out here in the next couple of weeks. Make sure you're paying attention on Amazon. Just whenever that book drops, it'll be a nice compliment as far as all the shows that we have done. A number of other resources coming out, you'll be able to find on the channel coming out here pretty soon. So a couple workbook things and a couple of other questions to keep your minds going and thinking and walking through things. And today I'm really excited to have Kate with us. And, it's just amazing as we meet people in life. We're challenged in ways. We are caught to force ourselves to think through things and even to really enjoy and embrace the things of life where we're at. And today, Kate Hufnagel is with us, and I'm just so excited. If you go to thedigitalwrangler.com, thedigitalwrangler.com, and so whenever you go, that's in the show notes. Also, you can find a link in there. That's how you're going to find information as far as with Kate and her company that she has started. Phenomenal resource. I'm eager to walk through a lot of the conversation today. But Kate, thanks for being on the show and welcome.
Thank you so much, John. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. How can we live with intention? And maybe we're even going to talk about how do we pass away with intention.
That's an interesting hook to bring into the show. I was thinking about your background, Kate. I mean, everything from, when you're going through schooling and internship down at NASA, you spent some time as far as over a local Midwestern company at John Deere, engineering background, master's in engineering, and spent time with CIA and then technology. Interesting background. Give us a description, maybe a little background of yourself, if you could introduce everybody else to yourself and also some of your background. And how did you come up with the idea for the Digital Wrangler, and what is it all about?
Oh my gosh. Well, it can be a little bit of a loaded question. So I kind of wish we were at a bar. So I grew up outside New York City. Both my parents were born and raised actually in the city. And after getting a couple of degrees in engineering, I pursued that from a career perspective. Worked for a satellite company, wound up working for John Deere. And while I was at Deere, 9/11 happened. And my father spent 44 years working in the financial services world and was in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. So less than a year later, when John Deere made the very wise decision to close the factory that I was working at and lay all of us off, I was like, hey, maybe I need to look at relocating to the national capital region, and maybe I can enter the intelligence community. So I wound up doing that for quite a while. When I was approaching 40, I kind of had a little bit of a midlife crisis and picked up and moved to Colorado. And that's been 10 and a half years now. So a later in life individual who became married at 48, and I've got a couple of bonus kids who are now 21 and 25. And I really could not be any happier. I, shared with you before we hit record that I just turned 50 a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And I'm living my life the way that I want to now. And thanks to working with my financial planner starting back in my 20s, I had a lot of financial freedom in my 40s, thanks to all the hard work I put in my 20s and 30s. So 3 years ago, I left the world of big tech and DoD contracting and the Intel community and started a company called the Digital Wrangler. And it was originally envisioned to help people just, manage and organize their devices and their data. But then it dawned on me that there is this new concept out there called a digital afterlife. And I've been helping a lot of colleagues navigate some challenges associated with loved ones that they've lost, whether it is, not being able to access, say, a loved one's Facebook account. And even years after their loved one has passed, Facebook not being cooperative because the loved one that they lost didn't know how to properly inform Facebook who to give access to their accounts to. Same with email. One of my good friends tragically lost his wife at a very young age, and they had two little kids at home. And the wife paid all of the bills online, everything. And when she suddenly was no longer around, the husband was so grief-stricken and so focused on helping the kids that it wasn't until 7 months later, when the electricity was cut off, that he realized, oh my gosh, I haven't been paying the electric bill. I haven't paid any utility bills. I haven't even been paying the credit card. All because he had no access to his wife's email account. So these are the stories now that I am trying to work with individuals to prevent. And so one of the first things that I ask my clients is, what do you want your legacy to be? And that was sort of a question that my financial advisor asked me in my first meeting with him in my late 20s. Except his was like, what's my definition of financial freedom? But oftentimes people associate their legacy of, okay, I'm going to leave behind this house for my kids. I'm going to leave behind a couple of $1 million if we're so lucky. I'm going to create a foundation, and I want to, have a reputation centered around community service. And all of those scenarios are very valid. But I talk to my clients about this other aspect of a legacy, and that's the digital legacy.
That phrase digital legacy, let's kind of dig into that, because our lives are all digital now. I mean, we have a footprint in every single area. And so when you say digital legacy, that might be a new phrase to a lot of people. How would you describe a digital legacy, and why is it important to consider that?
So I would describe a digital legacy as, think about all of these digital accounts that you have. And I would also add devices into that as well, right? Because if you can't access a loved one's cell phone, let's say, right, because facial recognition doesn't work when you're on a ventilator, you need to prepare your loved ones, in my opinion, to understand the scope of your digital legacy. So in my password manager, this number may sound horrifying, but I have over 500 passwords in my password manager. So that means I have over 500 online accounts. And if we think about Amazon, we'll take Amazon as, because they're a big one out there. Amazon isn't mailing us a paper statement or a paper bill to our mailboxes. And so unless our loved ones know, one, that we have that digital account, and then two, potentially how to access it, these accounts are going to basically be floating around out there. And in the case of Amazon, what if you have a PayPal account connected to your Amazon account or a credit card? Now, PayPal doesn't offer the same fraud protections as a credit card, but one of my dear friends of 20 years, her sister, just a couple of weeks before Christmas this past year, shared that she had her Amazon account hacked, and someone used her PayPal account to purchase $3,700 worth of items.
Wow.
And so all of these accounts, in some form or fashion, are going to need to be dispositioned, for lack of a better word, whether it's shutting the account down or it's transferring, say, I don't know, my Hilton reward points or my United miles to somebody else, because those travel reward points have the potential to be worth significant amount of money if you happen to be what I would affectionately refer to as a digital hoarder. A lot of people like to hoard those things.
So I think about the word Wrangler. And so my mind then goes to the West, and you're obviously out there in Colorado. So we have a lot of horses out in Colorado. And so with a wrangler, there's someone that really is employed to handle animals and really train animals to get them to their productive and whatever their function is. So when we talk about a digital wrangler, how does that word apply to kind of the function that you're doing?
So as I work with my clients, I'm educating them, providing them, whether it is personal stories or stories of other clients. Of course, I protect their privacy, to explain the importance of wrangling all of their digital aspects of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I was speaking to a group of small business owners not too long ago, and I brought up Facebook in the presentation, and there was a woman who raised her hand, and she was bawling, John. I mean, she was bawling.
Wow.
And through her tears, she told the entire group that they really needed to listen to me. And she proceeded to share that she lost her husband from a long extended illness about 7 years ago.
Hmm.
And this was before there was a concept of a digital afterlife or a digital
Mm-hmm.
legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And even though his passing was anticipated, given his circumstances, they never talked about Facebook or really any of his accounts. So his account had been lying dormant because she had no way to close it. And about a year and a half ago, the Facebook account was hacked. And she discovered it was hacked because the bad actors were sending her messages
Mm-hmm.
through her husband's account. And
Hmm.
that was really what was upsetting to her. And she said it was emotionally traumatic. And so these are the stories that we're not thinking about, because we're taking the tech that we rely on every single day to do podcast interviews,
Sure.
to pay bills. We kind of take it for granted. So when I work with my clients, I'm providing a combination of education, informing them on how the law handles digital assets, and then I'm coaching them in organizing different areas of their lives that goes far beyond what an estate attorney handles.
Hmm. So when I kind of look over there, you would primarily work in four different areas, when I can tell, Kate. So you have the estate organizing, business succession coaching, organizing, and then also password organizing and digital organizing. Let's dig a little bit deeper into each one of those four if we could. That way, I think we can communicate with people really the importance of each of those four areas. And I just want to share with everyone, every single day, our firm, we work with over 5,000 households all around the country. So a lot of people. We hear stories continuously from our existing clients and from folks that just call our firm that walk through issues they're having, either with a deceased loved one or even with current technology. They cannot access their accounts because they're not sure of the passwords, or there is somebody that broke, a bad actor that broke into some digital presence, and or they are trying to sell a business, unwind a business, and all of a sudden are realizing the digital assets they have, they've not shepherded them as well as what they should. So we hear, folks, this issue is huge and is going to get bigger the longer we go in technology.
No, I agree with you 1,000%.
Mhm.
It's only going to become more of the Wild Wild West, which means, more wrangling, forgive
Yeah.
the pun, is needed.
So get your hands around wrangle it. And really, and when you do that, it's something where I've learned over the years, folks, that there's things that I can do on my own. And we all have a certain level of understanding, we have a certain level of experience. But the reality is when I do that, maybe there's a lot of information I don't know. I'm not as complete. And so partnering up with somebody that really has the experience, that has the, quite honestly, an engineering background, and so understanding the logic and process of things. But then you put into that the technological experience of working in technology, so an understanding of the digital assets, that's an invaluable resource. And so that's why I want to introduce everybody to Kate today, is that it's just something where it's a unique combination to bring together. Hey, Kate, go into detail, if you will, on those four areas, maybe estate organizing, and then password organizing, digital organizing, and then maybe let's kind of cap it off with business succession. I kind of held that one to the end just because we have a lot of listeners Maybe they're solo entrepreneurs, or maybe they have a small business. And it's kind of like, boy, you have this incredible business that's really provided for your family. But a lot of what we're doing now in business is so digitally related. So it all goes together. Let's hold that one off to the end, maybe.
Okay. That sounds great. So, estate organizing, another description for this is legacy organizing. So, how do you ensure that your loved ones know everything
Mm.
about your modern day lives? So, ranging from access to your devices. I don't want family members having to go to a funeral home director and begging access to a deceased loved one's body in an attempt to see if their fingerprint is going to unlock the phone, right? I mean, the loved ones are already going to likely not be in a positive frame of mind.
Right.
Why put all of this additional burden on them? So I work with individuals and families to ensure that everything, the devices, a list of financial assets and liabilities is current. Because let's face it, in our digital world, right, we are always trying to kind of find that online bank that's going to give us that better interest rate. And with Americans updating their will on average once a decade, our financial liabilities and our assets are changing much
Mm.
more, rapidly
Right.
than once every 10 years. And then let's also talk about the medical information. And it's not just preparing for the inevitable, but it's also being prepared for the unexpected. How can we use tech to ensure that first responders know our medical history if we happen to be in another state or on vacation? And also, the healthcare systems are the number one targeted by bad actors. So
Hmm.
we also want to make sure that after our passing, our loved ones know what online medical accounts we have so they can get those closed, because we know the advances of artificial intelligence are rapidly growing, and we don't want bad actors to somehow get access to any of our data. So I
Hmm.
cover the whole gamut when it comes to estate and legacy organizing, to include the high sentimental value items, whether that's a family recipes, family Bible, or physical photo albums. We just want to make sure that loved ones know what they want. And I just wrapped up one of my 12-week programs last night, and one of the women in the class shared that she didn't realize that all of her jewelry, like, she is a little concerned. She has apparently quite a jewelry collection, and she's worried that her daughters are going to see all this jewelry and not know maybe what pieces have high financial value, or what are pieces that maybe were handed down to her from her own
Mm.
grandmother. So I don't just focus on the digital assets, though that is a key aspect of my business, but from a legacy perspective, we'll also talk about the high sentimental value items too.
I think so many people, they consider the estate process as really being a will document or a trust document, but it's so much more involved in that, isn't it?
It's so much more. And my this cohort that wrapped up literally last night, that's what they were focused on for them, in terms of, I when their parents passed, they didn't know if mom or dad wanted to be buried. And if they did want to be buried, they didn't know where. And
Mm.
so these clients that I worked with last night were telling me, I have sat down with my adult children, and this course has inspired me to have these conversations with my kids to figure out, is cremation or a funeral or a natural funeral really going to be what I want to do? And so I just love how my clients then are inspired to have these conversations with their loved ones, because I think this older generation that we are starting to lose, generally speaking, has not been as open to those
Mm.
conversations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is actually a process to help even shepherd in those conversations, is to help walk through it. So it's huge. So
Yes.
let's pass with let's go ahead and pass that conversation onto the password organizing.
Yes. So as you mentioned earlier, right, everything in our lives today is either entirely digital or has a digital component to
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And, these bad actors are counting on us to reuse and recycle passwords. And I know it is very hip right now to be sustainable, but I want to be clear. When it comes to passwords, this is not the time to recycle. And, this is not the time, because just think of all of what's made the news in the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
United Healthcare being hacked, car dealership network being hacked, and this is just the beginning. So it's really important to practice good digital hygiene and make sure that you are using a unique and complex password for every one of your accounts. And let's face it, like, I can't even remember 3 passwords. How am I going to remember the 100 or the 300 that I have?
Yeah.
So I help clients figure out what is a great password manager solution based on the devices they're using, the browsers they're using, and their online behavior.
Mm. It's interesting. My dad, he passed away 3 years ago, and he was a technology guy and wrote a lot of original coding, and he had a lot of success in his career. And so he always told me he had a very strong password system. And so he changed it every single week. His primary password into his system. And so with that, though, it was this really interesting thing. He had a formula in his mind that he would communicate to me. And it was something like, you use the third letter in capital, then goes with the fourth number with a certain month and the small lowercase. We bring in the Latin, we bring in a little bit of ancient Greek. And so at the end of the day, and then all rotates through in the system. So he would always refresh that in my memory. And then whenever he passed away, I sat down. I had no idea what he was doing. And then he actually had changed his keyboard to the Greek language because he taught himself Greek in the 70s, ancient Greek. And so it took me forever. I said, Dad, couldn't we really work with somebody or have like a password organization system that makes more sense to that? It would have been more helpful than me having to
Gosh.
go and talk to, somebody about an ancient linguist about what he used in his password system. And so
Right.
there's so many things on passwords of doing it, yet we have to be organized in what we're doing, not only to protect the assets as far as from whenever we're alive, but also to help transition that data whenever we happen to ultimately pass away or become incapacitated.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, when I talk about a password manager, I'm talking about a technology solution. My
Mm,
parents are in their early 80s,
yeah.
and they're not going to learn new tech at this
Mm,
point in their
mm,
lives. And well, for better or for worse. So two years ago, we just passed the second anniversary. My dad had a couple of medical emergencies. So he was in the hospital at the age of 81 for the first time in his life. Remarkable to make it that long without having any serious health issues. So he's in the hospital for a few days. I fly home, and one night after dinner, I hear my mom at the kitchen on her iPad, and she is saying words that I never imagined would ever come out of her mouth. And she shared with me that she was trying to log into their joint account to pay some bills. And I apologize, this might be a little bit long of a story, so it might get edited out. So I suggest to her, I said, well, why don't you bring, dad's iPad to the hospital tomorrow? Oh, Kate, that's a brilliant idea. So I did not go to the hospital with her. I just dropped her off the following day. So I pick her up the following evening after dinner. I leave her be in the kitchen. And again, more colorful language is coming from her mouth. And I sit down and I'm like, okay, Mom, I thought you were going to talk to Dad about the passwords. And she says, well, he wouldn't log on using his iPad because he noticed that the hospital Wi-Fi was not secure, which I thought was very smart of him, but she
Yeah, it
was
is.
very irritated. And then she whips out this like paper address book that they had repurposed
Uh-huh.
to write down all of their passwords. And she says to me, your father has written all the passwords down in code, and I don't know what the code is. And so I collected my breath and I just said, well, it sounds like you and Dad are going to have another conversation tomorrow. And I just walked out of that room after I laughed. And I'm thinking to myself, thank goodness my dad is still able to communicate.
Right.
Because in his mind, this was secure.
Right.
But what he neglected to do was to take that extra step and tell his wife of 57 years
Sure.
that the passwords were in code.
And I think that's very common. So your parents
Yes.
went through a very similar thing that my dad walked me through, which that leads me to believe that's how a lot of people operate. We don't communicate these things. So, Kate, have you noticed, are there tools or processes that you recommend, or are there some out there that make sense to use?
In terms of password managers, I have 3 on my go-to list.
Yeah.
They are in no, well, maybe I'll try and alphabetize them. 1Password, Bitwarden, and Dashlane. All 3 of them have a blemish-free track record, but again, it's the one that might be the best fit for you is likely going to depend on the devices that you're using, the browsers you're using in your online behavior. But those 3 are very popular, and that is all that these companies do. They are in the business solely to protect passwords.
And with the uniqueness of each one of their solutions, as far as the different devices that you use, that's why you really want to talk with someone like Kate, because she has the tremendous knowledge on those tools. As you explain your devices, your usages, your tools that you use, well, then she gets you great direction as far as on which is the best one to use that makes sense for you. Walking through also then digital organizing, how is that different?
Well, that's a little bit different because, the average American takes 7,000 photos every year on their phone.
Wow.
Right? And if you think about it and you were to go back on your phone and look through those photos, I would kind of bet you $1 that some of them are no longer worth holding on to. And so let's just say I never delete any digital photos. That is not true, but for the sake of this scenario. So over the next 20 years, I'm going to, in theory, accumulate 140,000 digital photos. How are my loved ones going to know which ones are the ones that they might be interested in?
Right.
They're not going to go through 140,000 photos.
No.
Right. And so whether it is helping steer them in organizing their photos, organizing their email, organizing their digital files, again, I approach these challenges from the perspective of, okay, what legacy are you going to be leaving behind? Because if a loved one is going to discover 200,000 digital photos and they're not organized, they're going to probably wait a really long time before they look at them.
Yeah.
And then when they do, they're not going to remember who's in what photos.
Yeah. And so there's so many things with that element of saying, let's just make sure that we have a process and get in place as far as to totally organize that digital footprint. It's an important thing to do. And I know myself, I have a lot of photos of nothing, just whenever I accidentally touch the wrong button on my phone. And so that's preserved in posterity for my kids, the grandkids to look at.
Right. And so
Here?
yeah, so similar to like chores around the house, right? We take out the trash, we do the dishes, we do laundry, and similar to personal hygiene practices, we brush our teeth every night. I help inspire my clients to come up with digital hygiene routines. So whether that is looking through photos 2 minutes a week and deleting ones that from the week prior, oh, the shopping list, I don't even need it right now, like delete it. So coming up with little tips and tricks like that to help them manage their digital presence.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Kate, phenomenal information. Speaking of tips and tricks, as we're kind of wrapping up here, any additional last minute recommendations or advice you would give to people as we're kind of closing things down for today?
Maybe 2 things. One, I inspire the audience to think about how do they want to pass away with intention? What do they want that legacy to be? In addition to their financial legacy, what do they want their digital legacy to be? And then hopefully our conversation has inspired the audience to talk to a loved one. Hey, spouse, I know you're very private about your phone and I don't have the password to your phone. Can we talk about that? Can you leave me instructions someplace so that I will be able to get into your phone or your laptop?
Mm-hmm.
Just start the conversation.
Yeah. So much of life is starting the conversation, and sometimes we get maybe intimidated of starting it, but it's critical we have those conversations. And Kate, I'm glad that you and I have had this conversation today. Such phenomenal, not only knowledge, but also wisdom for us to get to people so they can be in a better spot to make more informed decisions and truly help them in their journey of living an intentional life. And folks, make sure you check out the show notes. Everything from Kate is in there as far as contact info and ways to connect and get more information, even different speaking engagements, different parts of around the areas that you might be able to catch her at. So definitely check that out and make sure you give a good follow out to Kate. And then, folks, I want to tell you so much. Thank you again for listening. And it's a blessing just the feedback you're giving us. Any other ideas you have, questions you have, make sure you get them over to us, and we'll be sure to be in touch real soon and talk over those things. And until we get together next week, thanks you so much, and make sure you go out there and live a life with intention. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for listening to the Great Decisions, Incredible Lives, Retire with Intention podcast with host John Creekmer. Follow us on social media, visit our website, and join our community of like-minded individuals redefining retirement and living incredible lives. Please leave us a review and share our podcast with others who may benefit. We wish you a future filled with purpose, fulfillment, and the joy of living your incredible life in retirement.